everybody. I am so excited, and it's my pleasure to be able to interview my good friend Jeremiah Bowser today. Jeremiah, thanks for being with us.
Of course.
I'm excited to ask you some probing questions.
It's my distinct honor and privilege to answer your probing questions to the best of my ability.
All right, this is going to be good. I can already feel it. Okay, so Jeremiah, tell us about your family.
Oh gosh, I have a lot of children. Only two. I feel like I have a lot of children.
But you have two awesome children.
Two boys, Jed and Elijah. Jed just turned 13, Elijah's 9. And I actually am married as well.
Great.
Courtney, I've been in love with since the 3rd grade. We could talk the whole interview about that story.
Oh, wow.
We've been married for 17 and a half years.
That's amazing. Congratulations.
Thank you very much.
And Courtney is a fabulous
She is. She
woman.
should be here doing this interview on my behalf. She's much better at these things.
She is really good in front of the camera.
Yeah.
I like her her beautiful project interviews and stuff, but we can talk about that in a minute. Getting ahead of myself a little bit.
Come on now, that's question number 12.
So, right. So you and I have known each other since I think 2004 when I first.
Really?
Yeah. When I first moved to Jacksonville, you were one of the first people that I actually met.
I remember
You and
thinking the
Courtney.
first time that you led worship at New Life, I was like, who in the world is that? And she needs a project like right now.
Oh, yeah, because you really helped me with the first.
I don't know about that,
You
but
did.
I was a connoisseur of your music from the very start.
Well, I'm just saying, the first album that we did.
Yeah, we did it
You
together.
helped a lot with at New Life, my very first project. That was lots of fun. Oh my gosh. Well, tell us a little bit about your background, your background with the Lord and your background musically.
Okay, so we'll start with my background in music because that kind of happened before the Lord. But when I was 8 years old, I started taking piano lessons from a little old lady at the beach. And she taught me all she knew within about the first 3 years. And then she referred me to take lessons from the head music professor at Jacksonville University. Her name was Mary Lou Krosneck, and she was a hard teacher.
Oh, really?
She trained me hard. She would cut my fingernails if she were tapping on the keys. But after that, I got involved in the youth band at church as a part of the youth group. And we were a part of a youth group that would take missions trips every summer.
Yeah.
And so oftentimes worship would be a part of that. And I was always kind of the backup keyboard player, never singing in front of anybody. In fact, one time I was in my room, I remember this, in my room practicing my keyboard with my headphones on as an early teenager. And my dad burst into the room and he was like, "What?" I was singing along. That was what it was. But he couldn't hear the music. So
He's like,
he burst in, "What's happening? Are you okay? Are you okay?"
That voice!
No, it was, "Is everything all right in here? Do you need medical attention?" So it was a couple more years after that, thanks Dad, that I eventually got the confidence to sing in front of people. But I grew up in church, going on these missions trips and stuff, but I wouldn't say that I fell in love with Jesus for me until I was probably 18 or 19 years old, which is kind of crazy because I'd done a lot of stuff in ministry until that point, but it was based on probably what my parents hoped I would believe as opposed to what I actually believed. And I think everyone faces that transition in their walk with the Lord if you grow up in church. And,
I think so too.
Yeah, and so after I found that, or after I crossed that bridge, then it really just, my two loves, music and missions, really kind of became something more than I ever thought it would be.
Yeah. Wow, so when you were in youth group and you said you went on some of these missions trips, is that when you started to really fall in love with the nations? Or did you have was there a favorite country that you went to that really grabbed your heart? Or
Well, the very first one I went to was Grand Cayman when I was 12 years old on a missions trip. It was pretty incredible. I think our youth pastor wanted a scuba diving trip paid for by the church. No, but the second one later that year was to Moscow. And as a 12 or 13-year-old going to Moscow, I often wondered if my parents were trying to get rid of me. Because when we were 12 and 13 years old, that was a very tenuous time in Russia. We're not young, as young as we were. So it was right after communism fell, 13 years old over there, and then I would go back year after year, 2 years to Russia, 2 years to Belarus, then we started going to France and Scotland. And that was the time for sure where the nations really, I loved them. I fell in love with them and always wanted to worship in them. It was kind of an instinct that I had that it's hard to explain, but I never had the opportunity until one year going to France when I was probably 17 years old, 16 or 17. There was no other worship leader going on the trip, and our youth pastor's wife was like, "So we know Jeremiah's going to play the keyboard, but who's going to play or who's going to sing?" And I just fell silent. And then she asked like 3 more times, and finally I'll do it, you know. And it was nerve-wracking, but I'd been studying French in school, so I could sing a little bit in French if I really tried. And that was the first time I'd sung in a foreign language, and that has been a theme that's kind of followed me through the last 15 years.
Wow. Awesome. Now, so like when you, okay, well, I'll come back to the question about the nations in a minute, but let me ask you right now, what do you have other people in your life who were, that you would say were really influential to you as a worship leader, as Jeremiah, the worship leader?
Yeah. I grew up loving, of course, Delirious and Matt Redman. I remember the first time I heard Delirious's Live and in the Can album.
Oh, yeah.
I was in a little band with some of my friends, and we were playing in a city just north of here. And on the way up during the drive, he had just gotten that CD, and it came in a tin can.
I had it too.
Oh, it was great.
Awesome.
And I just remember hearing "Did You Feel the Mountains Tremble" for the first time, thinking, because I grew up a U2 fan, and I thought, oh my gosh, I'm seeing how it all works. Like, it opened my eyes. Modern worship is amazing. It's not just stuffy church music or 1980s integrity stuff.
Yeah.
It's actually got some of what I like to hear, you know.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Well then, so okay, if you can figure this out, how many countries have you been to?
I made a list a couple of years, maybe 2 years ago, because I was curious about the same thing, and I think it was only like 35 different countries.
Only 35.
Yeah. You hear other people, like, I hear other people talk about how many countries they've been to, and it's always a bigger number, and I think, well, I feel like I've been to more countries than that. It sounds silly, but then if I think back about how many repeat times we go to places, which I love that, because I love relationship, and I think that that's far more important than a number on a page. So we've been to Africa, to Uganda probably 8 or 9, 10 times, and same to Zambia, and then Brazil so many times. So many times. Probably 60 times.
Are you can sing in Portuguese?
Yeah. So you'd ask me, about my favorite country to go to, and it would probably I'd have to say Brazil. There are elements of different countries and cultures that I really love. I love Scotland. I love the temperature in Scotland.
Yes.
And the overall vibe. But Brazil, there's a little bit of everything in Brazil. It's an enormous country, and they speak Portuguese. A lot of people think they speak Spanish, but it's Portuguese, and it's not an easy language.
All right, and it is different than Spanish.
Yeah, quite a bit.
Yeah.
I've been to a lot of Spanish-speaking countries, and I rarely will understand a word they're saying because I've spent so much time in Portuguese. But I love to lead worship in Brazil and in Portuguese. It brings out a different thing in my voice, if that sounds...
No, that makes sense.
Actually, one of my favorite worship leaders growing up was a guy that was an Irish missionary to Brazil. His name's David Quinlan, and he still has a massive ministry in Brazil. But I always loved his voice. He didn't have much vibrato. He just had this cry. And part of it's who he is, and then part of it's the Portuguese as well.
The language, yeah. You should hear me sing in Russian. It really brings something distinct out of my voice.
I'm going to Lithuania in 3 weeks, and I need you to tutor me.
Right, you do not want me to tutor you. I try. But, that's a challenge for me. But I wanted to ask you, what stands out to you about the way that, like, different cultures worship the Lord when you go different places, how they respond to the Lord? Is there something distinct about that, or the way it makes you feel, even like how you experience it? Yeah,
of course, like Brazil, they're very passionate people.
Right.
You don't have to be there for long to understand that. And leading worship there it's easy, and you can it kind of redefined things for me totally. But going from that culture to China or to Europe, or even in Africa, like in Uganda, I remember bringing my guitar thinking, why did I bring this guitar? Because you go to church there in rural Uganda, and it's like they just have drums and shakers, and they'll worship for hours. They'll set the tempo with a shaker, and they'll go for it, and you don't even miss the instruments. But then I bring out my guitar, and it's like they're confused by it. They know what it is because they've seen TV, but why would you have that in worship?
Interesting. Yeah.
So, balancing all of that, but yet there is something familiar in every country. And the culture is different, the language is different, the expression is different, but the pleasure of the Lord is always the same. And that's what really struck me. It's like he doesn't prefer Portuguese more than he prefers French. He doesn't prefer their expression more than somebody else's expression. He looks at the heart. And when I was I had this experience in a village in Uganda that I can talk about a little bit later, but it was, man, this is totally different to everything I've ever known in worship, but yet totally familiar because of God's response to it.
Yeah. That's awesome. Well, so talk to us about what you're doing in ministry now. Talk to us about Ignition Point
Okay.
and the other things that you're doing.
So probably 12 years ago, my wife and I formed Ignition Point Ministries, and it had just come on the heels of her. She had an art center in Jacksonville for 10 years called Shoshana Arts, where she had a whole staff teaching dance, drama, music, and art to kids from 3 years old on up to adults, with the purpose of having them unearth their gifts to use them in the nations, to use them for the kingdom. So when that was coming to a close, that season, we still knew that arts were going to be a huge part of who we were. I mean, Courtney and I kind of fell in love on the mission field, so that was never an issue. We always knew that the nations were central to our relationship and our ministry together. So we started Ignition Point Ministries, and the ignition point is the place at which fire can sustain itself without the constant application of heat. And I think that's the dream of God for every believer's relationship with the Lord, because so many times we go from like Holy Spirit experience to Holy Spirit experience, or conference to conference,
right,
or CD to CD, and we have these
ups and downs,
highs and lows in ministry. And I mean, growing up, I experienced it all the time, and I still do. You know, these moments where you feel the fire, and then the moments where you're like, where did the fire go? So the ignition point is, I think, the point at which the Lord wants all of us to be at. That point that the fire can be sustained, and instead of this kind of trajectory, it's more of either a constant or a constantly rising.
Yeah.
And we found that the place for us that works the best is when our passion can combine with our purpose.
That's good.
We found that like one without the other is like worship without the word.
Yeah.
Like you're a one-legged person. If you only have passion, you're going to burn out. If you only have purpose, you're going to burn out. They sustain each other. So for the last 10 or 12 years, we've been running with that. That is the message that we spread everywhere. If it's through what we write, if it's through what we sing, what we preach, what we produce. Our mission, the mission of Ignition Point Ministries, is to spread that one message. That passionate relationship with Jesus combined with a pursuing your God-given purpose can change the world.
Right.
So it takes on many forms. You know, we do a podcast. We write these weekly emails that we send out around the world. Courtney's written a book. I've done music, and it's always the arts. And we have this thing called the Love Project, where we take arts training into underserved communities, whether it be Uganda or even the other side of Jacksonville, train young kids to use the arts to reach their communities. And it's just been this huge mix of things that you put in the nations, and it becomes a really adventuresome life.
I love it. I love that there's so many different things that you're developing. And you guys have been traveling a lot, I think, recently. You said you're going to Lithuania.
Yeah, I'm going to Lithuania coming up. And the four of us, Jed, Elijah, and Courtney and I, will go back to Brazil in June. We usually go to Brazil a couple times a year, Africa a few times a year. And this year, we're actually going to spend some time in Europe. We've been praying that God would open doors there, and He has, and continues to. So we're going to try to just go for a month and take the boys and see where it leads.
I think that's great that your family can come with you and can do it together.
Yeah, I feel like, you know, I mean, what is the goal that we all have? Is to reproduce ourselves, because no one wants to be part of a one-generational kind of thing.
Absolutely.
And the kingdom is multi-generational. And the only way to do that, as you know, with Access, is to train up the next generation. So we feel like that's our little part with our boys. We want them to love the ministry. We want them to love the nations, to have that well-rounded viewpoint of the world. It's very easy to be American.
True. That's true.
I'll never forget. First time I came home from Africa, I mean, it destroyed me seeing what I'd never had that context in my life. And we're driving home from the airport. And we pass McDonald's, and the kids, they're young at this point. They're like, let's stop. I want a Happy Meal. I want a Happy Meal. And I'm like, you will shut up. You will never have another Happy Meal. No,
That's hilarious.
that was one of mine. You know.
But isn't it interesting, though? I'm sure you experience this jolt inside of you when you go, like, one week you find yourself, like, in Uganda or somewhere where, like, dirt floor, minimal instruments, high praise, they're going for it. Then you come home to, like, the next week you're in a comfortable American church that has all the lights, all the things, and the passion isn't as strong as what you just experienced in a foreign nation. With less. Yeah.
Completely. I think that's the struggle of every missionary. I think a lot of people have termed it re-entry, and for everybody, re-entry means something different, whether it's just that spiritual jolt, or if it's actually how do I take what I just experienced here and apply it here? And I think that's always been a challenge that I've embraced. I've tried to embrace anyways, because I feel like there has to be somebody that can bridge that. There has to be a worship leader or a number of worship leaders that can be a voice to that, because otherwise we're not portraying kingdom in what we do. If we can only do it in one place, it's not kingdom.
Good point.
You know?
Yeah, that's true. And that brings me to my next question for you, which is, well, let's put it this way. What are some of the challenges that you face in ministry, and what are the things that you do to overcome those challenges? Oof. Or just pick one.
Yeah,
if you just
the biggest one would have to be comparison.
Okay.
I know we've talked about that a little bit. And in this world that we live in, obviously, it's so easy to compare now with social media and the availability of everybody's highlight reel.
Right.
You know, it's so easy to compare what we do to what other people do. And that's in the world, and that's also completely valid in the Christian world as well. Because we can look around and see what other worship leaders are doing, or other missionaries, or other ministries, and we have that built-in tendency to weigh ourselves against other people.
Yeah.
And if our definition of success is not what it needs to be, if it's not God's definition of success, then we can get lost in that. I had this experience years ago where I'm watching, you know, I mean, we have these experiences all the time because we can turn on the internet and watch what our friends are doing, you know, what people we know are doing in the world, and think, wow, that's an enormous stage they're on. I don't understand why I'm not on that enormous stage. Or I was really dealing with that a couple of years ago, and I just, you know, it's always a fight, but I was losing the fight that day. And I was watching some people I knew do some amazing stuff. And then I was realizing that I was just sitting in my spare bedroom watching this on my laptop. I was, well, I could say it was like the global headquarters of Point Ministries, but it was my spare bedroom. And I'm watching this and I'm just sinking. I can feel myself sinking. And that's a constant battle I have, is to remind myself of who God has made me and the validity of what God has called me to do. So afterwards, I was just going to go run up to Starbucks and get some coffee. And I was going to go put my shoes on. And it sounds so simple. Going to go put my shoes on and just get in the car and go. And I was like, what shoes am I going to wear? I could wear these. And then I felt like the Holy Spirit was like, you need to put your boots on. And I thought, my boots? Like, I don't even know where they are. And I do know if I find them, they're not cool. They're not the style of the day. They're not going to look great. And so I went and I climbed through my closet and I found them, pulled them out of a bag. And I haven't even brushed them off. The last time I'd worn them was in Uganda, and they were dirty. And then right then I felt like the Lord was like, this is who you are. Yeah. This is the sign of the validity of your ministry. This is the dirt of the nations.
Yep.
And there's not a greater honor than having the dust of the nations on your boots. And then I remembered the last time I wore them was in Uganda. My friend and I took a taxi as far as we could. Then we got out and walked through this cornfield, and our destination was this little village church. And we walk in, it's mud walls, a tin roof. It was a rich church with a tin roof. We walk in and there are like 20 or 25 Ugandans there in their village, and worship had already started. The kids are on the drums and the people are singing. And I walked into that room and I felt like the Lord told me, Jeremiah, there are so many people that you know in ministry today that are never going to get to see this because there's not a nice enough hotel nearby. There's not a promise of a big enough offering. There are not the things that we so often and sometimes legitimately put as conditions to what we're doing for the Lord. He said, so many people you know aren't going to get to see this. And he said, but you know who's here? And I was like, I'm here. No, but he was like, I'm here. I'm the King of Kings and I'm the Lord of Lords. I'm the most famous. I'm the highest profile in ministry today. You know, it's the Lord. And if the Lord's there, and he told me, and it was a challenge that keeps me going, what excuse do you have? And I thought, what excuse do I have? But still, the battle of comparison is one that I have to battle every day. And I battle it by reminding myself that I weigh myself on a different scale. Yeah. You know, it's not about followers. It's not about views. It's not about sales. It's not about invitations. It's not about my itinerary. It's about how effective I can be doing what God is calling me to do. Right. And it might look totally different, and people might not ever see, but he sees, and that's the scale that he weighs on. So if I'm in my right mind, and if I'm at the top of my game with the Lord, and my mind is, you know, being renewed daily, because it's a daily battle to fight against that. Yeah. That feeling of lesser than. Yeah. When it's just different.
I think a lot of people who watch this will really relate to what you're saying. It's something that a lot of us have dealt with, or maybe are dealing with, just that challenge, and remembering like how God uniquely wired each of us for the purpose that he has, the destiny that he has for us. And then it's like you said, like what matters is just obedience and, you know, a heart before the Lord that's towards him and willing.
Yeah. And that humility of realizing that
Yeah.
if it is truly a body of Christ,
Yeah.
then I can't be upset with who he's made, with the part that he's made me to be.
Exactly.
I actually have to fulfill it to the best of my ability, or I'm letting the body down. And I just have to always remember that God's definition of success is rarely ever going to intersect with the world's definition of success.
We need to remember that all the time. That's so good. And I was thinking, even just the past few days as we've been preparing for this interview, I was thinking about like your songs, and I went back and listened to some of your older songs too, like just because you have quite a few albums. And I was like, oh my gosh, I forgot about this song. This song was awesome. Like I just kept having that experience over and over. It's like Jeremiah writes some really good songs, and you do. Like, and your most recent album, With Me Always, is really good. There's one of my favorites that we're going to get to sing later is Only to Please You. But then there's another song on there called Who You Say I Am.
Who You Say You Are.
Who You Say You Are. I always get that confused. Who You Say You Are. And I'd love for you to tell us kind of the backstory of that song.
Okay, sure. I think that one of the struggles we face the most is believing that the Lord is who he says he is and can do what he says he can do.
Yeah.
And I've heard that quote that all of sin is a result of the lack of trust in God. And if you trace all sin back, it's us trying to make the way for ourselves, or us trying to find the answer or provide for ourselves.
Yeah.
And so years ago, I've got this friend in town, and he had just had a little daughter, he and his wife, and she was 1 year old. And he called us and said, could you please be praying, because we're taking Jalen to the hospital. We've just taken her to the hospital, and they said she has meningitis. And meningitis, I don't know if you're familiar with it, but it can kill an adult very easily. Like most people that get it are very sick, and if they don't die, they'll either be blind or deaf for the rest of their life. And Courtney and I actually just met a guy in Brazil 2 months ago that is blind and deaf because he had a bout with meningitis only a year ago, and he's our age. So it's a very serious thing, and there are two forms, bacterial and viral. And bacterial is the worst. And they said that this little girl, Jalen, had bacterial meningitis at the age of 1. And so her parents are in the hospital almost hopeless, like, please pray, because every report we're getting is if she comes through it, the best case scenario, she's going to be blind or deaf for the rest of her life because of the swelling on her brain. So of course we start praying, and this has only happened to me probably 2 or 3 times before, but I just went into the world headquarters of Ignition Point Ministries in our spare bedroom at the time. And I sat down just with my guitar, and I thought, God, I feel like you're going to give me a song. And so I started thinking about my friend as this girl's dad. Like, what does he need? If I were him in this moment, what would I need to hear?
Yeah.
That would stir my faith. And I just started singing that chorus. My heart knows that you are who you say you are. And this day, I will choose to believe that you are able. Because so much, it doesn't contend on whether or not he's going to be, or depend on whether or not he's going to be faithful, because he is faithful. Depends on what kind of demand that I'm going to put on that faithfulness. Either I'm going to doubt that he's faithful and I'm going to struggle, or I'm going to know that he is and can accept any outcome from that. So I did a quick recording of this little song on my BlackBerry at the time and sent it to him in the hospital. And he told me that he played that song over her at her bedside for the next month.
Wow.
As she fully recovered from meningitis. There was no negative result that came from it at all. And even years later, as she grew up and could talk and was interacting and all, she would get in the car and ask her mom to play her song. Mommy, play my song.
Wow, that's so good.
So because I ended up recording it and put it on the album. And I did it because I think that message, it wasn't the song that brought healing to that girl. It was just the fact that my friend's faith could wrap around something in that moment. And I think a lot of songs can be that for people. They can be something that stirs our faith, that puts us in the right frame of mind. Because so much of success in our lives and with the Lord is about our state of mind. Because he never changes.
Right.
He's the same yesterday, today, and forever. And if we can focus on that and believe it with all our hearts, then good things are bound to happen because he's good.
That's right. Now, how can people who are watching this right now, how can they connect to your ministry? How can they purchase your music? How can they support you?
So we have a website, theignitionpoint.org, theignitionpoint.org. That's kind of our main hub. Of course, we have Facebook and Instagram and all that good stuff. We also do a podcast that's on every major podcast provider, the Ignition Point Podcast. And we really want people to hear that. We put it out every month and really enjoy recording it. It's Courtney and I both going back and forth, just falling in love with each other in front of a microphone. No. And then as far as the music goes, I was in Germany 2 months ago, and I gave a young German guy one of my CDs just as a gift, and he looked at it and he looked back at me like with this, "You're never gonna believe this." I was like, "You don't have a CD player, do you?" He's like, "I don't have a CD player." So digital places are the best to find my music, I think. iTunes, YouTube. I put out a lot of videos on YouTube, mostly in Portuguese.
Right.
But
you're a big
it's all
hit.
there.
You're a big hit in Portuguese.
Spotify. It's all on Spotify too. So.
Okay, awesome. Yeah. So you guys be sure and check out Jeremiah Bowser on iTunes or whatever digital download platform you prefer.
Oh, yeah.
And go to theignitionpoint.org to learn more about their ministry and support them, because this is really good soil to sow into. We're so grateful for the time that we've had with you today.
Yeah, thanks for
Jeremiah.
asking. Sure.
Absolutely. You guys, thanks for watching. Be sure and subscribe to our YouTube channel if you haven't already, because we're going to keep putting out great videos, and click that little bell to let YouTube know that you want to be notified when we do put out new material. Thanks so much. Take care.